Hello, and welcome to another episode of Cities, Skylines, Valar. We're on episode 8 now, and this episode we're going to be creating a vineyard and a winery. I kind of wanted to make this vineyard and winery out in the country in a big valley, and there weren't any valleys currently on the map I had, so I had to do quite a bit of terraforming this episode to make one that was suitable. But yeah, I had loads of fun doing that actually. I kind of created a nice big river that flows through it, and the vineyard itself actually looks really good. I was looking at some reference footage to see what vineyards tend to look like. I've not actually been to one ever, so this was kind of all a bit new to me. But I do like to do some research and kind of make it a bit true to life. So that was a big part of the preparation for this episode, was just trying to figure out, what does a vineyard entail? Where would they be? All that kind of stuff. And I downloaded a few new assets for this video, including the UK road asset. I had this kind of shot of it here. It's got loads of really cool stuff that kind of remind me a lot of the A roads that go around England and a lot of the A roads that I grew up near. So it's a really nice asset, and I'd highly recommend it. And then, I ended up actually managed to make a vineyard that was pretty much fully functional. So yeah, if you enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up, leave any feedback in the comments below. If you're enjoying the series, subscribe, and let's get into the time lapse. So the first thing I did was I just wanted to identify a good spot to put down the vineyard. I wanted it to be very out of the way and kind of in the country, and I wanted it also to be in a valley, because when you look at vineyards from like France and Italy, they always tend to be in valleys. I'm not quite sure why. I'm not a vineyard expert, so I couldn't really talk about that. But I basically made a kind of a plateau in a V shape, so that I could kind of get the nice smooth valley aspect that I want, and then just using the ramp tool on the terrain modifier, kind of just going up to this plateau, I managed to get some really nice kind of rolling hills. I didn't want anything too steep, because I want it to be more of like the rolling hills of England than, like a huge valley or a huge mountain kind of landscape. I managed to get quite a good effect just by using a plateau and the ramp tool. So one thing I did want to do with the valley was to add a little stream or a river that could kind of snake through it, just to add a bit of extra detail to the landscape. Most valleys are formed because there's a river flowing through it, and because ours was situated next to the main river that goes through our city anyway, I thought that would be a perfect outpoint of this little stream. So I kind of like snaked it around the valley and then made it eventually join up with the main river. It was easy to make the actual stream and the riverbed, but once I actually added in I made a small lake at the top, and once I added in the water there, it did take quite some time for the water to sort itself out and eventually flow kind of how I wanted it to. There were a few teething problems. Some of the things I'd terraformed were a bit too narrow, so the water was struggling to flow through it very well, which kind of resulted in like waves of water coming down rather than it being a slow, steady stream. So this did take quite a while. I ended up flooding a lot of the valley for little bits, but I did manage to get there in the end. So after a lot of work on the widening of the river, I started to flow a lot better, as you can see now. One thing I did find that was quite irritating was that the trees in City Skylines don't get destroyed if they get hit by water. They do eventually wither and die, but they don't actually get removed, so you're left with just an empty tree with no leaves and just bark, which kind of looks a bit naff. So I had to kind of do a pass over the entire river just to make sure that I had gotten all the trees out of the way. But yeah, you can see the river flowing a lot better, and it gets all the way down to our main city river now. So it does look a lot better. Still a bit of flooding in, so I went back and fixed that up too. And I kind of extended the lake up at the top as well, just to make it a little bit more interesting. and kind of raise the water level a little bit as well. The last thing to do to complete the valley and the terraforming, I just used the ramp tool again. Kind of similar to what I did from the highway up to the plateau, but this time I just took it from the river and just made a nice slow, steady incline, and then kind of created this really nice, realistic looking valley out of it, which was exactly what I wanted for the vineyard to be put on. So good, kind of happy with how this all turned out. So the main route that I wanted to get to this vineyard is going to be just a very small rural junction off the highway. So I just did some really small terraforming and created a very basic, very traditionally British junction onto some of the smaller A roads that you'd find out in the countryside. So I just kind of raised a little bit of a hill, created a bridge over, and had a very small little junction with just an on-off ramp. I don't expect it to be too heavy on the traffic, so I didn't go too deep into creating a really fancy roundabout or really worrying about traffic control, because I expect it to be relatively smooth out here. And I just had one big long windy A road to get to the vineyard. So in a future episode I am going to be creating a really small, very British village in the bottom of this valley. So keep a lookout for that episode in the future. But what I wanted to do was just create the A road from the junction that we made all the way to this village, and then the winery was going to be along this A road somewhere. So I was actually using the UK roads assets. They're really, really cool. They've got loads of really cool roads with like hedges and brick walls going along the side, and then when you put them over rivers they form these really nice stone bridges. So that's the asset that I used to create this nice looping long A road. So now onto the actual vineyard itself, and what I did was I added a kind of a flat area to the hill, and that was where all the courtly house of the vineyard was going to go, as well as like a hotel that I planned on putting in, and had this really cool idea that this archway that I've just put down would be kind of the entrance, and it would again feed into the history of this region. You know, this is very clearly like a very old Roman archway, and the Romans loved their wine, so it would make sense that they might have, you know, implemented a vineyard here, if it's got the right climate and stuff. And so yeah, I thought that'd be a really nice entrance feature to the vineyard. So I put that in, and then I put like you go through that area, and then the big manor house would be facing you, and then off to the left, if you went round, it was going to be the hotel, and then if you went round the right, that's when you would actually get into like the farming area for the grapes, and you know, you'd have all the houses with the equipment, and yeah, all the workers would go, to keep them a bit separate from the actual owners of the place, who would probably feel like the picking of the grapes was beneath them. So I wanted to add loads of like muddy decals to the area where the actual workers would go, because you imagine that area would be properly well trodden. So that's why I've added loads of mud decals there. And then for the actual stately home bit, I want it to be a big grand entrance. So when you come through the archway and you see this big home, it's like really impressive, really well maintained and kept garden. So I added a bit of detailing to the little area in front of the house, and I kind of lined all the roads with these really tall, thin trees, to give it kind of a really posh Italian south of France kind of vibe. So that's what I was going for there, and I quite like how it turned out. I did pump this area full of trees just to try and avoid just the plain grass areas. I actually found a really cool mod that gets rid of, I really dislike the decals that the base game adds in, where you have kind of these really weird wavy grass patches. I really didn't like those, so I've managed to find a mod that turns those off. So I've added that into the game and tried to get rid of all those little horrible patches of grass that ruined the aesthetic. And this hotel that I'm putting down now is a really cool asset I found on the workshop. I'll link it in the description below if you want to make use of it. But I had the idea that this would be kind of a tourist destination, like not too touristy, but you know, a very posh hotel that the rich and famous could come and visit and you know, kind of look over the entire valley, over the vineyard, and then the vineyard would be part of that hotel experience where you'd have a tour, you'd have some wine and all that good stuff. So for the last part of this video, it's the detailing of the actual vineyard itself. So I started with just adding some extra little props to the workers area just to breathe a bit more life into it. Add some dead trees and some broken down trucks and stuff just to give it that extra little bit of life. And then what I'd done is as I did with the Arthur's Sea episode, what I had next to me while I was building out the actual vineyard is I'd found some random vineyard in France on Google Maps, and I kind of hovered over it and looked at the layout. And that's kind of what gave me the idea for the big stately home as well, and the big oval entrance to it. And then I just planned out the vineyard field exactly how it looked on Google Maps. So it was these kind of just big long straight lines with tons and tons of grapes all going down it. I think they're grape vines, they're not grape trees, are they? So I just kind of replicated that. I found some really cool assets on the workshop. So the ones that I'm plonking down now were like the big fields of grapes. There were some that were individual vines that I put some down of later, but I felt that would probably eat too much of my GPU up. So instead I just used these assets, the rows and rows of them, just to make it look, or just to ease the load on my graphics card just a little bit. Yeah, here's the individual ones I was talking about. So I did a few rows of those just to add a little bit of extra flavor to that specific area. And yeah, it kind of looked really good actually. The other thing I did was I went on maps and did street view kind of on the opposite hill from the vineyard, and I looked across and it ended up looking quite a lot like mine does in Cities Skylines. So I was quite pleased with how it turned out. The lodding of the assets is a bit aggressive, like you might have seen a few frames ago, that they do disappear a little bit when you go back too far, but it's not too much of an issue. And then I added the stone walls that were part of that UK road asset tool. I just kind of plonked those all the way around the vineyard. So that brings us to the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a really good time making it. I like doing these kind of projects that are a bit unique, you know, not just normal generic doing districts and stuff. I like doing things that are a bit out there and a bit strange. If you have any ideas for what I could do in the future, please drop a comment below, and I could definitely look at doing that. I really appreciate any feedback you guys give, and if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying the series, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.